Okay, so this is another recording. My name is Andy Graham, Andrew C. Graham. With Automation Eat Time and Kosher and Halal Restaurants, kosher-halal-restaurants, something like that. There's hyphens in words.com, and this is on the fourth commandment of the Shabbos. And so I guess it is a little bit permissible for right now, because of Bamidbar. I like to call it Bamidbar. It's Bamidbar. Bamidbar means streams in the desert or something like that. You know, and Book of Numbers. So this Parshat is every Parshat to me is interesting, but this Parshat is especially fascinating. You know, because for all kinds of things. Because there's a song about is Hashem's Book of War included in this Parsha? We'll get to Hashem's Book of War, I think, in chapter 22. It's later in the chapter. Yeah. It's either chapter 21 or 22. It talks about Hashem's Book of War. I think it's in this parsha. It might be in next week's parsha. I think it's in this parsha. Something like that. Anyways, that's another kind of proof text in the quote-unquote Old Testament or in the Stone edition of the Torah that talks about these things that were given to Moshe at Mount Sinai. It's written about in Hashem's Book of War. It alludes to there are other books that were written, that some of them were lost, some of them we knew about, things like that. But those things are fun for people that are involved in the defense of things in globalized countries, and they make their bombs and their weapons and their things like that. And I also have some designs, that are fascinating, at least for me. I learned these things along the way. I had some people that my family was a portion of that, and also some of my friends and my study partners, I guess, since I was a younger lad, they were also involved in that world. Okay, the world of Torah is different. There's similarities, there's correlations, but there's also whatever. So right now I'm going to talk about more of Torah. You understand? I also know about some of the other things. I guess I learned those things along the way. So this is in the next portion about. I get to say my prayers here in a little bit. And the reason why I'm mentioning saying my prayers because this talks about Moshe's. I'm not going to say mistakes, but it wasn't a mistake because it happened how it happened. You understand? Moshe Rabbeinu. The person that Hashem, the creator of the Kodesh Baruch Hu, entrusted the oral law and the written law, the beginning of the initiation of the religion to Moshe Rabbeinu. What an impossible task that was given to Moshe. Right? You understand? So it was a weighty level of responsibility for one could say that event. It transformed the entire world. It took thousands of years. The Kodesh Baruch Hu gave these an important responsibility to Moshe Rabbeinu and the Aaron of Cohen. You see. So there's different explanations in the Torah about some of these things. I want to say there are 5 explanations. They use letters instead of numbers there, pun intended. And when I was attending a class, immediately there was a rabbi, a studied rabbi. They also had their mistakes, don't get me wrong. At that time I attended the class, my level of mistake was at letter E. What you looking at? I'm looking at a word on a page. I kind of already knew what the containment of these explanations were already, perhaps, per the Zohar and the mysticism, were already contained in my soul before I arrived at planet Earth. They had to be brought out from who I was as a person. What does the Torah come to teach? What is the purpose of the Torah? So some of these explanations, and this is in chapter, I think, is it still in chapter 19? We're in chapter 20 now, okay? And some of these explanations, per the Stone edition, so you have to remember the conversation or the writing in the Stone edition, the commentators were wise enough, they had enough da'at, they had enough wisdom to realize that this Torah portion is perplexing and complicated. So they include many, many different things and explanations to I'm not gonna say cover for their errors in because there wasn't enough time. There's not enough pages to explain all the elaborate things contained in this week's Torah portion. You understand? You'd have to read all kinds of books and understand how this book is related to that, and how Aleph Tav. Why doesn't it say Aleph Lamed? Infinite. There's a limitation to everything. It says Aleph Tav or Aleph Tov, right? And things like that. You see what I mean? So that is included in there. That is an entire word, but it's only 2 letters. You see what I mean? There's a differentiation between Hebrew and English and Arabic and other languages included in there, right? So there's only 5 opinions that are given in the Simple Stone edition, but some says there's many opinions as a pomegranate to these things. So the commentators had to try to do their best to put in the things that were important and not important and things like that, so they could help their readers and the learners of Torah realize the importance. So it's nobody's fault. It's just there's a lot of things to know and explain on the planet, especially with Torah. You see. So by the time I reached this guy, Rabbi F, in my meager opinion, I was already at level 5. I was already at letter E. You see. And what are you looking at? That was my mistake. I was looking at things. I was fascinated by things. I was studying. I was reading the Torah. I didn't know quite no Hebrew. Oh, wow. What an impossible task Moshe Rabbeinu gave to me. And he gave these tasks to every person, especially if you're a learner of Torah, you see. And sometimes the more lenient people say, regardless of the religion, you see. And the reason why I'm going to say that is because Rashi, during a class, I said, well, what does Rashi know? Rashi knew what he knew. He was in a different portion of the world studying Torah, mostly in Eastern Europe and things like that, right? But the Zohar and other books in the Talmud, some of the other Spanish and more Middle Eastern versions of the Jews that we were studying in different lands throughout history, throughout dispersion and exile. So we learned things slightly differently, And so Rashi's opinions are Rashi's opinions, but they are not as applicable. They're applicable, but they are not as applicable. You see, it helps us with explaining the differentiations between the commentators. So, in other words, Rashi says the Jews' prayer to Hashem is the voice of Hashem that is so important. But see, at the time, Rashi, from what I understand, he didn't know Zohar. The Zohar wasn't really, maybe he did, maybe he did not, right? The Zohar comes to teach, and it's also in our Siddur, that there is a prayer that goes direct to Hashem, no matter what tribe or nation, you see. The prayer of the poor, the prayer of the orphan's prayer, the widow's prayer, prayer of the mourner. These things are important for everybody, regardless of Jew, non-Jew, and things like that. The Kadosh Baruch Hu, the creator of the universe, considers these things in some strange way. We don't really know. Okay, some things we know, and sometimes we don't. You see, or they, or the Hashem. Sometimes Hashem knows Hashem. Sometimes Hashem does not know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And that is an error that is articulated in letter C. And so, but when I first studied with Fromowitz, my error was letter B, but it was actually letter E. In other words, at the time, according to business, what was the error? The what did they call it? The proverbial. What do they say? The question that's not really a question. It's posed to the whatever. It's not a redundant question, but a proverbial question. They use different words in the Stone edition, but shall we? It says shall we? The mistake was in words. Shall we bring forth water? In other words, it was slightly saying, "Who are you to say we? Shall we bring forth water?" It's more complicated than that. You have an entire planet Earth, gazillions of people, 8.5 trillion or billion people on planet Earth, as far as we know, and all these things on business transactions. So who are you to say, "Shall we bring forth water?" ... Like you are totally in control of everything. Isn't that a little bit like, yeah, you guys were something over there, but who are you over here without all those things? You see. What if I take you and put you in that area, even with your U.S. currency? If I take you in right now and put you in Tehran, even with your U.S. currency, will it be? If there's no currency exchange, will they not just slaughter you and take it and then use the currency exchange? What if I do that and you were in someplace and stranded in May or wherever it is, So Be careful if you place too much of your emphasis in your business, in your money, in your connections. That's basically what it is explaining, in my meager opinion. Shall we bring forth water? Dot, dot, dot. He says, why don't you take a tiny step back and say, shall Hashem bring forth? Dot, dot, dot. You see how a slightly different word change or a slightly different perspective brings a level of, was that our mistake? Was that my mistake? And then the kun olam comes into play. You see, and letter. What are the other letters? Letter B. What did letter B say? Letter B is Rambam. So letter B is a little bit with me and my brother. What does it say? And Tractat Avos. Became me and my brothers, I should say, became angry. Became angry because the people did not quite understand what was going on at the time, because he was at the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. They did not completely understand the way he was thinking about things. Also, it became a little bit angry. And he said, he messed up something that was important to him. And he had to come back later and say, now I have to fix these things. You see. That could be in combination of the nation of Edom, because in 420, the nation of Edom became upset. You'll see, he was upset. It says the nation of Edom comes against Moshe Rabbeinu, but it's complicated for people like us because I have a little bit in my DNA, in the way I am also a little bit of the nation of Edom. It's perplexing, you see. So although I have a little bit of Torah scholar and Jewish in me, I also have a little bit of the nation of Edom flowing through my veins throughout the history in a different line. So it's perplexing for me, to say the least. You see? So, in other words, and then of course Rashi's view, going on strike back in the 1970s, they literally went on strike on their jobs. Even at that time, there's a couple of companies and they used to protest, and they literally used to go on strike because they say, we deserve more money, so we're not going to do anything. A strategy worked back in the day, but they don't go on strike as much as far as I remember. There was another time I think the whole planet Earth went on, they stopped for a while, but then they say, now what do we do? So anyways. So that is about it for right now. So one could say some people perhaps took a little bit of the wanted to teach Torah to me. I was like, who are you to try to teach Torah to me? I read the Torah. One could say I memorized the Torah. It is ingrained in my soul. See. So these explanations aren't for everybody. So the Torah comes to teach. What does the Torah come to teach? And then there's also, what does the Torah teach you based on your experiences and scenarios? So my opinion on things may be a little bit unfair to teach to the people. That's a little bit of the conundrum. So my opinion on things is my opinion based on all kinds of scenarios that occurred. You see, does that make sense? So what did the Torah come to teach me specifically? But is what the Torah taught me also applicable for everybody else? And a lot of people would say, be careful what you say, because the Torah came to teach you that, but it did not come to teach them that. You understand? So it is a weighty level of responsibility, you see. So, so things like that. So anyways, I hope you enjoy the other explanation. I think, was there anything more to that? Let me see what it says here. Oh, Chanel. Yeah. I can tell you this. Barbanel. Chedush Harim, Barbanel agreed with Rashi. So this is the conundrum with when two opinions agree with each other, what they can do. So the other three opinions perhaps were more applicable with me, but what happens when a Barbanel agrees with Rashi? Then it becomes a little bit perplexing. So this is the conundrum with Torah scholars and rabbi discussions. It's like, well, the other three opinions, do they agree with each other? They realize the potential truth I don't know, it may not be accurate for them, but it's true. You see the difference between truth and accuracy? So it may be true. They realize the truth of some of the other opinions. The conundrum is when a Barbanel agrees with Rashi. So a Barbanel, perhaps, for both of those important sages and rabbis, they agreed with each other. So this is the splicing of words. This is how the interpretations go. So they are actually, so that's why that opinion appears more often than not, even in the Simple Stone edition, because one of the sages and rabbis actually agreed a long time ago that was, but Baruch Hashem for the other explanations about things. So that's the difference between hierarchy of opinions and a hierarchy of agreements. So there's a hierarchy to the books, that's true. But then there's also the sages and the commentaries and the opinions. Oh, that's what becomes slightly perplexing. It's called a paradox, So what the Torah comes to teach me about scenarios is potentially going to be completely different what the Torah teaches generalistically everybody, who reads the Torah or is new to the Torah. And it's also different so the Torah comes to teach different things to different people, you understand, based on scenarios that occurred. So my opinions and my way of thinking about things may be slightly differentiated based on, because it becomes, if I say more than this, it goes into other learnings that is not necessarily, I may be able to find sources in the Torah that will support my words, but they would be committing the same conundrum of saying, what did I say? And now let me see if I can find a source in the Torah that supports that opinion. And that would go against the previous talk of saying, did not the Council of Trent and the Council of Nicaea do the same thing? In other words, was your process rooted in pure Torah learning? And the answer is what? For me, probably, I do not know what percentage it was. This is the conundrum. So how pure was your Torah? You see? So these are the conundrums in explanations. So, anyways, thanks for listening.